Today we're going to bust down and look at actual bids from general contractors, because if you've ever gotten one of these things, they're like 14 pages long, they have numbers everywhere, they're very hard to read, and it's very hard to compare apples to apples sometimes. And you're going to see that there could be tens of thousands of dollars difference depending on the bid and how you read these things. We've got one project in here, it's a tiny JADU, and one bid comes in as low as 125 and another bid comes in at like 190. And the right choice isn't always the cheapest one. So I've got a couple experts in. These are advisors from Realm. They're also the sponsors of this month's video, and they're advisors at Realm who are used to breaking these things down, walking homeowners through different bids from different GCs to make sure you're comparing it apples to apples. So we're going to go into all that detail. We're going to talk about tips and tricks if you're doing this on your own. If you happen to want some help, there's a link in the description below, or we can figure out how to do that. You get a special discount because you're coming from How to ADU too. So let's crack in. Amberly, Andy, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Super excited to be here.
Let's do the JADU first, because as soon as I looked at this, I'm like, there's two bids here, and they're literally for a small project, but it's in San Jose, which is expensive. So small project, they're looking at one bid at 145K and one bid at 195K, something like that. So that's a huge difference. Is that apples to apples?
So it is a huge difference. The funny thing about this homeowner is we actually had three bids. I threw one right out because it was so ridiculous. It lacked so much detail. We had a range from 125K to the 190. And in the 190 and in the 125, didn't include any finish allowance. There were a lot of details lacking. And then we had this middle bid, which isn't uncommon that the middle bid is like the one you end up wanting to go with. In this case, it was a little weird, but we had this middle bid that was actually broken out in the least detail. So in the 195 bid, you can see it's like what is actually going towards the foundation, what is going towards electrical. But in the middle bid, what they did, which I really liked, was they just said everything per plans. And so with that, you're like, okay, as long as it's in the plans, it's included in the bid, and they had a finish allowance. So when we looked at that 145K bid against the 190K bid, it was like very clear that that's the one we should be digging into to determine if it's a fair, safe bid for the homeowner to sign.
Nice. And so when you're talking to a homeowner who's maybe never done a project this big before, do you have to explain what finish allowance means and like what all that stuff means, or do a lot of them know already?
Definitely a combo. In this case, this homeowner, I'm still working very closely with. The project is actually just almost done, which is great. For him, he was like, I really want to do this as budget as possible because I'm mostly going to use it for family space and maybe I'll rent it one day. We just want some extra room. And so he was like, all finishes included. Like, does that mean literally everything? Is there anything that I should be worried about? And to me, the most important thing is if it says all finishes included, then we need to go and look at the actual exclusion list and make sure there are no contradictions. So that's where we started. If the exclusion list would have had anything that's related to a finish, we would have paused there, gone back to the GC, but the exclusion list did not. So it was pretty good. But yeah, so like a homeowner's asking, what is a finish? It's really anything that's not like rough construction. It's your cabinets, your countertops, the tile, backsplash if you want it. It can even include your doorknobs, all your lighting. So it's super important, even if someone says finishes are included, to make sure that it's actually every finish. And they're not going to say, oh, but we didn't say we included the doorknobs. We just said we had the cabinets, because that can impact the cost a ton.
Mm-hmm. You guys work with kind of a stable of builders. You go back to people you've vetted. Do you gain like a familiarity reading their contracts over time, or is it like different each time?
It's a mixed bag. So some of them were like super consistent. It's like, all right, we get the bids and every time they're the same, they have the same level of detail. Honestly leads us to having the same feedback and questions for them over and over again. And we're like, we've done this 3 times. Why aren't you automatically including it on the 4th time? But other ones are great. We go through rounds of different bids with them and their bids just get better and better and we have less follow-ups. But in general, like no 2 bids are exactly alike. So you always want to look at them from page 1 to the signature to make sure that nothing has slipped through the cracks.
Have you seen people make expensive mistakes before?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like big ones, especially with ADUs, it's not even about the ADU, but a lot of the times a homeowner with an ADU, right, they have something else they're doing that's not actually the ADU. But in this exact case, there's some siding or some stucco getting replaced on the outside of the home. We also want to add laundry into the main house. And so when you're obsessing over all the typicals for the ADU bid, but you have one or two other things, you got to make sure those aren't missed, because suddenly you think, you're at 145 and then you're starting construction and the contractor is like, oh, wait, did we talk about this thing in the main house? And that's the kind of stuff you want to make sure is in writing. The costs are outlined and nothing gets missed down the line. But there's definitely stuff that homeowners are unprepared for, right? It's like, it's always important because you never know exactly what's going to happen when you start construction. So you want to make sure that every homeowner is educated to that. Like, what if they find a ton of dry rot and the existing framing of the garage is actually not as in the same condition we thought it was? That's the kind of thing where we're not going to have an answer necessarily on contract signing, but you want to make sure that they're aware of it, because it can have a big impact on their life. And so it's like, this is where the bid is, all the details are locked up, and these are the things that could still change along the way. Many of them we can prevent, and that's one of the great things, like with our contractors, especially in this homeowner's case, we've done like 15 projects with some of them. And so at this point, if something little comes up, Realm is there and we're like, just do what's right by the homeowner. Let's not change order this. But without that kind of establishment, a lot of those things would become change orders and be really, really hard for the homeowner to navigate.
Yeah. Okay, let's flip over to Andy's. You've got like three proposals in one, which I had a hard time even finding all three prices. I found two. I found two big bold, but like that's the point. These things are hard to read. So can you walk me through and kind of like compare and contrast these three documents?
Yeah, so with this client, we got three different contracts that really are pretty typical of, three common ways you'll see different bids, right? One is really just a very boilerplate contract, very little detail whatsoever, right? It just says it's going to be the ADU, we're going to build it, it's going to be great, and it's X amount of money, right? Doesn't really have the amount of detail that we would want to see from a bid. The second one is much more detailed, down to the kinds of insulation, how big the beams are, which for some people can even be overwhelming, right? The third one is sort of in the middle, where it line items everything, doesn't have the price per item, doesn't go into quite as much detail, but is pretty expansive into what's going in, what's happening, what the contractor is going to include, and what the contractor is not going to include. And in cases like this, the way I typically look at bids is, and Ever really kind of touched on this, what are the inclusions, what are the exclusions, what's going to be a labor cost, so that's typically installation of finishes, what's labor and material costs, so that's for rough construction, plumbing, electrical, stuff like that. That's really the best way to kind of level these three bids, because they are, otherwise not really apples to apples, right? Because some have a lot of information, some have almost none.
If people are watching this and they haven't signed up with Realm, they're trying to assemble a bunch of contractor bids on their own. What's the language they use to make sure that the contractor gives them an agreement where they can compare things and can do a contrast between the two?
Really make it clear that you want to know what's included and what's excluded, right? So that it could be simple things like who's pulling the permits, right? That should be written out straight on the bid. What are my labor costs? One tip I do typically recommend is when you're bidding, you want to have some sort of rough scope written out already. So you try to stick to the plan, because sometimes what can happen is you're going to meet with a bunch of contractors. You're going to say, oh, I want to renovate my bathroom. And that contractor is going to have a bunch of different ideas, and every contractor will, right? So you'll end up with three different bids for three different projects, basically, that aren't apples to apples because you didn't stick to your scope. And that's not to say that you don't want to listen to your contractor, because they may have some great ideas, but at least try to keep to that same framework. And then if you need to incorporate and go back to vendors and say, hey, like, let's update this. I actually want to do marble countertops instead of granite or whatever it is. That's a lot easier to do because you already stick to your basic format.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. And then if that seems like a lot of work, and people are just like, can somebody fix this for me? How does that work with Realm?
Yeah, so we have multiple different packages. We have our Get It Done package. It's $4.99. And so what we'll do is we'll walk you through the entire process. You pay a deposit down. It's $500. That gets you a feasibility study, as well as a pricing estimate. So we'll go through all of your different projects, your bathroom renovations, your ADUs, of course, your kitchen renovations, new flooring, landscaping, pools. and we'll really break down every price so we can work on that scope beforehand, right? It's just like I just said. We want to have your scope in mind, ready to go. I want to do X amount of flooring and this kind of flooring here, and then from there we'll actually bid out your projects based on your selected scope. So we'll get you 3 bids. We'll make sure they're apples to apples, of course, and then we'll help you make that smart choice.
Let's say somebody signs up for the Get It Done package. That also, so you're saying it includes scope. It also includes design bids too, right?
Mhm.
And then
Yep.
GC bids. And then if they don't like anybody that they meet through you guys, what happens?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in general, our mission is, once you sign up, we're going to go through that report research. We're going to help you narrow it down. We're going to send the best 3 people we believe for our fit. Sometimes that actually includes, so even with an ADU, right? An ADU is often a good fit for a design and build team, but not always. Things like slope, flood zone, there's so many factors that might make us take a step back and be like, you should actually work with an independent architect and then go to a contractor. So while we say 3 bids because it's the most typical, sometimes you're actually meeting 3 architects, you're meeting 3 builders, you're meeting a combination of architects and design and builders just because you want to get to choose. We're pretty flexible about that. But let's say we get you that upfront set number and you're really not happy with anybody. Our job and our responsibility is to go the extra mile. It is our mission to make sure that you get your project complete to your satisfaction with as little pain as possible. So if you get 3, or you get whatever number we deem is right in collaboration with the homeowner up front, and you're not happy, we're going to get you an extra bid. We'll even get you extra 2 or 3 bids if it really makes sense. Now, if it's things like, you have a very unrealistic price expectation, we'll be honest with you about that. We'll say we really don't think it's possible. And part of our duty is to make sure that we're sending the right people to our vendors too. So there are circumstances where we'd say, we really don't think it's a good idea because we don't think we're going to hit the thing that you're looking for. But if it's ultimately like it wasn't a personality match, or we think the pricing was a little bit unreasonable as well, we will always take that step and get you some more bids.
On the other hand, if somebody finds somebody and they're, oh, this is great. It sounds like there's a lot of Goldilocks effect where it's like the middle one is often a winner. But let's say it's the cheapest one or it's the expensive one with all the bells and whistles. They pick one, they like it. That $500 or the $499 for the Get It Done package, does that go? How does the deposit thing work?
We actually just refund it straight back to the homeowner. We had done crediting and other ways, and it was confusing. And ultimately, when you work with one of our vendors, we just want you to have the cash back. So we're going to refund it directly.
That's awesome. So it's a deposit. It just sits there while we're going through this whole process. I get the scoping, I get the bids, I get your hand holding to walk me through all this stuff. And then at the end of the day, as long as I find the right person, I even just get the $499 back.
Yeah. And the other thing that we do, which I think is probably what makes us the most different from any other service you can really find like us, is once you start construction, we're still there. So even with this homeowner with the JADU, for example, there was a question about the plans. The GC interpreted one of the wall sizes differently than the homeowner and the architect did. I'm on the phone on a Zoom with all 3 of them. We're figuring it out. Ultimately, I'm fighting for the homeowner's best interest. And so we're really going to be there until the project is done. You can call us, you can text us, whatever your preferred method of communication is. Most of our real legwork is in that upfront to get you to pick and start with the right vendor, but we're there until it's done because that's our responsibility. And the project being, beautiful and on budget and on time really matters.
Oh, so far everybody who's signed up has loved the process. So I'm looking forward to hearing from more people as they chug down the road. I think it makes a lot of sense, right? A lot of people who watch this channel are sort of DIY owner builders who don't mind subbing all this stuff out themselves, and hopefully there's some good information in here for them. Some people who watch this channel are like, I really would love for somebody to take care of all this. And you guys have been a great fit for a lot of those homeowners so far. So if you think about that owner builder type who's not going to get the benefit of spending a lot of time with you guys, is there anything you just hope that they know?
I have a few things. I mean, when you're an owner builder, it's being really realistic. You can still use our app. If you have questions about how much should my electrical portion cost or this, still reach out to Realm. We have free consultations. You don't have to pay the deposit. Anything we can do to support, we will. But I think it's really being realistic with about the commitment that takes and the mistakes that can be made along the way. And there are so many people that I've met that have done it successfully. I wish I could do it. It's just, I already have this full-time job. But it's approach it the same way that we're saying we'd approach it with a general contractor. When you're getting bids from subs, when you're interviewing and vetting your subs, take the exact same approach. It's not just about being the cheapest, because suddenly instead of managing one person to budget, you're going to be managing tons of different subs. And if one of them messes up, or one of them lowballs the price or underestimates the price, I should say, and increase it later, you suddenly have so many more stakeholders that could throw you off. So I would just approach it the same way, but with every single person you bring on board.
For more information about how to work with Realm and other tips and tricks that they've provided on this channel, check out this playlist. This is just the tip of the iceberg, the GC's bids. That's like step 3 in a very large process. So check out this video to know how to start your project. And thank you very much for watching the channel.